Hi everyone, I'm Gayatri from Thrive Spyro, and today we are talking about something that I genuinely believe is one of the most underestimated problems in the organizations, and that is the employee engagement surveys. So, we've got a really insightful session today, and I am joined by two incredible consultants from Blue Pact Culture, Lynn Heckler and Laura Sayers, who are going to be sharing some practical insights with us. But before we get started, I would also like to start with a few questions. And we can also have a poll and see how many of you are able to relate to that. Right. So, one of the questions is, how many of you have wondered, is this survey actually anonymous? Can my manager read my comments? Or how many of you have filled the survey and never saw any real change? Or let's say, how many of you sat in a meeting and your HR department is telling you that your team's engagement scores are bad, and you're there wondering, I did everything right. What can possibly cause this? Right. And for my dear HR leaders, right? How many times have your management asked you, why is the attrition so high? And you literally wanted to answer that. That's because nobody even gave feedback, right? So I totally understand. So that is something that I feel as well. And I can also see the results coming in. We'll wait some more time. So yeah, I think pretty much all of us are able to relate to what we're trying to think today, right? So that is what brings us to our topic today, and that is why most employee engagement surveys fail and what you can actually do to fix yours. And that's what we are going to be covering today. And what we really have is what engagement really measures and what it does not. Why many surveys underperform and what the disengagement costs are. What high performing teams measure differently and where AI genuinely adds value. And finally, turning insights into visible progress. Having said that, I will let Lynn and Laura take over from here and tell us how they've handled this on the ground working with organizations across industries. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you, Gayatri, and nice to be here with everyone today. Um, because our time is limited, I'm Lynn Heckler, and I'm going to go right ahead and dive right into this important, engaging information. For me, one of the most important distinctions, and if there's one thing you take away from my portion of this webinar today, is that engagement and satisfaction are not the same. Um, there is a very important distinction between them, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that today. At the highest level, satisfaction keeps people comfortable. It's about contentment with their job, and engagement drives people to contribute. So ideally, we want to measure both of these things, but treat them differently. If you had to pick one, if you could only measure one, satisfaction or engagement, my advice would be to measure engagement. And the reason is it's a more strategically valuable metric and it's a better indicator of overall organizational health. Now, why is engagement a more strategically valuable metric? It is because only engagement predicts performance. So that is really the heart of the distinction and why we spend time trying to help organizations truly measure engagement as opposed to measuring some blend of satisfaction and engagement. When I think about satisfaction, I think about things that keep people comfortable on the job, right? What they stay for, what they get, pay and benefits, and good working conditions and perks, that kind of thing. But when we think about engagement, we really can think about what people people that stay for what they give. So, in other words, engaged employees are giving more to the organization. These are your highly motivated people with a sense of pride and purpose in their work. These are the folks that consistently exceed the performance expectations set. These are energized, passionate people. So here is a good working definition of engagement. And you'll notice that it's really based on the psychological and the behavioral energy associated with work. It's the emotional commitment plus the discretionary effort plus the sense of purpose. So these are deep things that people feel. They're psychological drivers, if you will, based on psychological meaningfulness, psychological safety, and psychological availability. So again, as opposed to satisfaction, which is really overall, hey, how content am I? How happy am I with this arrangement that I got from I've received from my employer right now? So again, it's really important for companies to truly measure engagement. So if you want to go on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of this interplay. It's important to understand the interplay between engagement and satisfaction. And so there's kind of four quadrants here, and I've named the four quadrants. So if you look at satisfaction and engagement on a continuum, kind of the panacea is that top right quadrant, right? We're looking for people that are highly engaged and highly satisfied. I call those folks the builders in the organization. And if you move to the left, you can have an engaged employee who might be dissatisfied. Usually it's dissatisfaction with a policy or an arrangement, or maybe it's their comp and benefits organization, but engagement is what retains people. So also you can have folks that are disengaged and satisfied. I call those people the comfortable cruisers. Engaged and dissatisfied, as we were talking about a moment ago, I call those folks the frustrated performers. And finally, we all know we've seen employees that are both disengaged and dissatisfied. They're the detached survivors, or what some folks now popularly call quiet quitting. So, when you think about your workforce, it's pretty easy to identify, who are the disengaged, who are the engaged, who are the satisfied, who are the dissatisfied. But it's also important to understand that these two things are related constructs, but they have different drivers. And so we have to measure them differently and treat them differently. So when we get our survey data, sometimes we'll get this information, and it's really not telling the full story. It's not telling the truth, and these are some of the reasons why. It's possible to design your survey so that you're just measuring opinions. You're not measuring either the true drivers of engagement or satisfaction. Sometimes companies will do these engagement surveys once a year and not treat them as continuous listening systems. And then when they get the data back, leaders are looking at the scores and they're saying, oh, gee, I did well or I didn't do well. But they're looking at averages. They're not really looking at the patterns and analyzing what the data is truly telling them. Especially with those open-ended questions and responses. Now we have the ability to use AI to analyze those open-ended responses, and our friends at ThriveSphere will get into that a little bit more in a moment or two. But most importantly, they get the data back, and it's just that. It's just data. They're not looking, or they don't have the ability to predict what that data truly means in the organization. So what is really important to remember, sometimes the dashboard, the data looks impressive, but then nothing really changes, nothing really improves in the organization. So it's really important to have an underlying structure of an effective engagement survey that actually measures employee perception around the true drivers and identifies opportunities for improvement. So now we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Gayatri, who is going to talk to, I'm sorry, we're going to turn it over to Laura Sears, my partner, who's going to talk a little bit more about how to design an engagement survey that truly works.
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much, Lynn. So Lynn talked about the differences between satisfaction and engagement, and it's engagement that really parlays to those talent outcomes that we want to see within an organization. So that discretionary effort, the intent to stay, that performance. And here are some four survey design choices that will help you separate noisy data from those surveys that are actually going to move the needle on engagement. And so the first thing you want to do is start with your model, measurement model itself. So instead of having just a list of questions, you want to understand what your model is going to be. So your model, you want to start with a core set of questions that you will ask year over year so that you can track different trends. And you want those questions to be anchored in engagement, not just satisfaction or an ENPS. We do recommend, one satisfaction-based question that measures ENPS, but overall, you want to make sure you're measuring engagement and other areas of importance to your organization. When you're creating your model, we recommend using an engagement index alongside your standalone questions. So engagement itself is so multidimensional that you really want an index to improve the reliability and give that diagnostic depth that you need so that you know where to act. And as Lynn mentioned, there are three core drivers of engagement, psychological drivers, so safety, meaningfulness, and availability. And each of those is complex enough to warrant its own set of questions within the index so that when your engagement score drops, you can actually see which drivers are at risk and driving that drop. Using that same logic, this also applies to other multidimensional constructs, such as manager effectiveness. In that example, if you measure manager effectiveness, say, across three different questions, covering, for example, feedback quality, direction, clarity, and support, you would then look at your index score itself to tell you whether or not manager effectiveness is an issue in your organization. And then those individual questions tell you which one of those areas of manager effectiveness is actually the problem that you want to address. And so this is really the difference between getting vague direction from your data versus an actual diagnosis. In your model, we also recommend using one consistent measurement so that you can simplify your analysis. So one scale, don't be switching between, say, a 5-point scale, 10-point scale. And we suggest that 5-point Likert scale. It's easy, and it also keeps people from staying in that neutral zone. Next, you want to build questions that measure drivers, not opinions. So as you build your survey, think about the different organizational levers that influence those three drivers of engagement. Things like purpose and alignment, growth and development, leadership trust, manager effectiveness, inclusion and voice, team collaboration, or well-being and workload balance. And when you're designing, you also want to make sure that you're avoiding vague or double-barreled items. So something like leadership communicates clearly beats out Leadership communicates and lives our values. You want to use behavior anchored, actionable statements that point to specific practices, and mix positive and neutrally phrased items to reduce bias. You can use open-ended questions. They're very meaningful, but you want to use them strategically as well. So, for example, maybe saying, what's one thing that would most improve your experience here in the next 12 months? This next one is especially important around anonymity and credibility. If your employees don't feel or don't believe their responses are anonymous or will be used fairly, your data will measure fear, not engagement. Your response rates will measure that. And it's your organizational culture that will drive how much people believe this to be true. And this is where having a culture of trust as your foundation is so critical. As you're conveying anonymity and credibility, you want to explicitly explain to your employees how their information or anonymity is protected. So make sure they know that there won't be identifiable fields or that there's a minimum reporting threshold so that individuals in small teams don't feel like their leader will automatically know who they are. For example, you might say, our minimum threshold is 5 6 individuals or 4 individuals in order for that data to get reported at the team level. Let your employees know what gets aggregated up versus individualized at a team level. And when you're sending out your survey invitations, make sure you're putting that in there so that your employees are seeing that up front, and make sure it's in every communication, in your leader talking points, in your survey introduction. You want your employees to see this several times. We know from data that it takes several times, up to 7 times for someone to see or hear something in order for it to start to become true for them. You want to make sure leaders do not misuse results. I have seen this happen where leaders try to figure out who said what in the survey response, and that will destroy trust immediately. So make sure your leaders are not doing that. And then also use a third-party administrator. Your employees feel more comfortable when the survey and the data itself routes through a third-party administrator versus doing it in-house, and that builds that confidence in the anonymity. And then the fourth one is designing your survey length and cadence for action and not survey fatigue. So you want to aim for about 10 minutes, which is about 20 to 30 items, depending on your question types. So whether or not you've used any open-ended questions or if you've stayed to your Likert scale. You want to use your engagement survey with your stable core index for trends, and then use your pulse surveys to gauge maybe prior actions, maybe specific things that are going on in your organization at that point in time. But your survey, your pulse surveys themselves should say narrow and purposeful. And one thing I really want to convey here is survey fatigue. We hear survey fatigue a lot, and oftentimes organizations think it's how often somebody is being surveyed. And what we find is that survey fatigue is not really tied to that question count or how often they're being surveyed. It's tied primarily to lack of action. And the worst thing you can do is ask for input and then go silent and do nothing with it. Employees are tired of not being heard. They want their voices to be valued. So when you apply these 4 principles, your survey now becomes a change engine. So now you have your results, and we can go to the next slide. So you have your results. Now what? And this is where most engagement efforts either gain traction or they'll quietly stall. And the difference is almost it comes down to what happens in those first 30 days after someone has taken their survey. So you want to, one, you want to analyze your data. I will say, when you share your results, share as soon as you can. It does take a while to analyze the data, but you can at least minimally look at your high level engagement score or engagement index score and start to share that with the organization. You will always want to go deeper than just that high level score so that you can really understand what the data is telling you. And so think of it this way, that your engagement score, that's your headline, but it's not really telling you where something happened or drilling down into what happened. So your real insights are going to live in the patterns. Think of things like which teams are significantly above or below your organizational average? Where might there be gaps by tenure, by role, or by manager? If you've used open-ended questions, what themes are showing up there that maybe the numbers themselves aren't capturing? This is where you start to find the story that becomes worth telling. Transparency. This is so key to continuing to build that trust, because what you don't want is you started with one engagement survey and then your employees don't trust you when it comes time to take the next one. So share those results transparently as soon as possible. Like we said, even if you don't have the full picture, just start with your overall score. This is what will teach your employees whether their voice matters. And if they feel like their voice doesn't matter, that becomes more damaging than any score ever could be. Within 30 days, you'll want to bring your results down to your division and team levels and be honest with what you heard. Be clear about what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. One thing you really want to avoid here is any type of shaming or comparisons that might make somebody feel change and taking any punitive action. You never want to take punitive action based on an engagement score. Your goal here is to build trust and not erode it. And then the next is facilitating your action planning. So at the enterprise level, your action planning looks like leadership saying, here's what we heard, here's what we're going to focus on, and here's the why. But at the team level, you want to use a different approach. This is where you want to co-create with your team. If you think about it this way, if your manager walks into the team meeting and just delivers the verdict, here's what we heard, you have missed the biggest opportunity to drive change and engagement. Engagement improves when people at the team level feel ownership over the solution and not just the problem. So at the team level, your conversation should sound like, here's what the data showed. What stands out to you? What matters most for us to focus on together? And interestingly enough, it's not always the lowest scoring item that your team will want to focus on. They'll start to look at the intersection between the score and what's important to them. And in the foundation of that is a manager who feels equipped and safe enough to have these conversations. And so leader enablement is really where the real work of engagement begins. And the Blue Pact rule applies here. You want to do fewer things better. You don't want a laundry list of things to change all at once. You want to pick those high impact 2, possibly 3 things those vital few that will create the greatest movement, and then build your action plan around those. And then last is sustaining your momentum. When you have action planning without follow through, that was just a meeting. The organizations that consistently improve engagement build a rhythm around their results. 30-day check-ins to see if actions are moving. 90-day check-ins to see, did they accomplish what they wanted to in their action plan? And do they now need to build a different action plan for another item? And so as we're sustaining our momentum, also consider pulse surveys, and then tie those pulse surveys directly to different areas of your action planning, not necessarily new topics. And most important here is closing the loop with your employees. Communicate with them. Show them what has actually changed as a result of their feedback. This is one of the most important steps, and this is what will tell your employees whether that next survey is actually worth taking. When employees can see the connection between what they said and what changed, you build the kind of trust that makes engagement a self-reinforcing system rather than just an annual exercise.
So, Lynn and Laura, thank you so much. That was, I would say, incredibly insightful and gave me a lot to think about, right? Like how we all work with a lot of noisy data. In fact, a lot of times, legacy tools that we use or the traditional practices that have been there so long gives us data about what happened in the past, but leaves us with very little to work on. What are we to do next? So I think to summarize what you said, I would say so long we all have been, in doing engagement surveys and working with a lot of noisy data where the engagement wasn't the problem, but how we've been measuring it and how we've been acting on it seems like the primary issue that needs to be fixed, particularly if we all want to move way forward in the era of AI, right? So let me build on this and tell you how today, particularly in times of AI, having HR engagement surveys is not just a HR problem, but rather the business's problem as such as well. So, think for an example, right? Imagine in an engagement survey asking the same question to an intern and a vice president of the company. Intern is probably thinking, oh, I know where the employee handbook is. Your vice president is probably thinking, oh, I need more resources, I need more budget, I don't think I have all the resources to do my task, right? Very, very different realities. But the question of the survey remains the same. We're not even trying to ask questions in a way that we all get data with which we can work on. And that is where all of the broken gaps that we feel are slowly, slowly popping up. So, again, a few more examples that I can think of is imagine in your organization, right? A 30-minute task taking 2, 3 days, are meetings constantly being rescheduled. Or I will even say, people telling that, let me get back to you on this. We can discuss this later. Work doesn't happen, it just gets slowed down, right? Imagine as an organization, you're paying the same employee to do something that can be done in a 1 month, but for 3 months, that is directly impacting your operational costs like a direct. That is where all your money is getting lost, right? And there you are, you're wondering what is happening in the organization. We are doing everything right, but every decision is delayed. Your RevOps manager is probably asking you, why are the costs always up? Right? So they're sitting there wondering, why are my operational costs so up? How do I get it down? Do I let go of people? But it can all be tied back to the simple concept of disengagement. Because people are there, people are doing what they are required to do, but not really engaged. Not because they don't want to do it, but they just feel like it can happen a little later. I'm not feeling well. I'm not feeling really motivated to do it. And that is where, when Lynn spoke about satisfaction, really comes into place. Am I motivated enough to do it and take ownership of it, right? And all of this is increasing your operational costs exceptionally, just like what McKinsey's data over here shows as well. And so the next time you want to have higher HR budgets, you know who to go to, right? I think you should probably walk into your revenue operations leaders and say that, hey, if you're looking to reduce costs for this year, I think we need to figure out how to keep our employees highly engaged and do not lose on any efficiency. So, what is the final solution, right? So, we so far can truly see that unless we measure engagement the right way, we are not going to get data with which we can probably take actions on. So, like Laura mentioned, it's all about asking questions that lead to actions, from generic questions to actionable questions. Let's say, for example, do you feel valued? Is a generic question, right? If people say yes or no, there is nothing that you can do with that. Yes, you feel valued. No, you don't feel valued. I totally understand. But in case if you change the narrative and ask a question that asks, in the past month, have you received recognition? Then the person answers again the same yes or no. If they say a no, you know that you need to go and tell the respective manager that, hey, your team is not feeling really recognized. Why don't you talk to them a little bit more? Why don't you recognize them slightly more? Your manager now knows exactly what needs to be done, and you know what exactly needs to be done to keep that particular employee more engaged in the organization. He will feel more recognized, which means he's going to be more engaged, which means he is going to be more participative in all that is happening in an organization, be it work, be it casual conversations that you have with your colleagues. And number two, the line with your business priorities. Again, an example is, let's say as an organization, you all want to have AI as a first priority, right? Instead of asking questions like, do you use AI? We can always change the narrative and ask, do you have the necessary tools and do you have the knowledge to use AI to do your everyday tasks? That changes the narrative. Either they tell you that they don't know how to go about it, then you know what needs fixing. You know that those employees probably need to be trained on how to use AI for their daily tasks. And that is something that their manager can definitely help them with, right? Uh, and number three is to keep it short and continuous. Like Laura mentioned again, if we all have a lot of data, we are all working with so much data about what happened in the past. We will not be able to understand what to fix right now so that we can move ahead. So, shorter surveys, let's say you're asking about what happened this month, you can probably control what can go wrong next month. But if you're going to be working on an annual survey, which has an entire um, thing about what happened in the last year and how people felt and how people are feeling about what happened in an entire year, we'll not be able to take actions with it and fix something on a shorter run. If we don't fix something again, we are going to lose business and increase costs. And personalized by role. Again, the same thing. If you're going to ask the same question to an intern and your vice president, nothing can fix that, right? We cannot take any action with that data. And build trust and act on the feedback. Anonymity definitely matters. Large, bold anonymity factors in the survey shown repetitively makes a lot more difference. And action items. This is where tools like Thrive Sparrow in particularly helps you with. So you'll be able to show your employees that you are taking actions on the feedback that they give in. A lot of people, right, when we started our session today, we did have a poll where it said, how many of you felt that nothing ever changes after you answer an engagement survey, right? How do I remove that feeling from my employees? Only by showing them that there are action items that have been assigned to respective managers or respective leaders to say that, hey, we value you, we are taking your feedback seriously, and have assigned leadership teams to act on the feedback that you have given. And last, use AI to drive action. We have so many different domains within an organization, right? We all are trying to achieve so many things. One person might be very, very good at their domain, but does not mean that they will be able to handle their team really well. Let's say probably they're an introvert. They just don't know how to go to their team and, casually have a chat and understand how to engage with them. We deal with different kind of people at the end of the day, right? We are the leaders in the organization, but as people, we also have our days. So every day I will not be able to understand How do I go about ensuring my team is highly engaged? Because I have another 100 tasks that are probably my priority, particularly when you move up the scale, when you have leadership teams who have various priorities. They may not be able to think, spend time, and be like, okay, how do I ensure my team engagement? They are probably thinking, okay, I'm going to go take them for a team lunch next week. And I can guarantee that that may not fix anything for us on the business impact levels. But they need to be told on what to do. The HR department needs to act as an helping hand there, right? If you can guide them on what needs to be done, why don't you recognize your employees more? Why don't you, go to your teams and talk more? That kind of action items or train your employees on how to use AI for their everyday tasks are something which is controllable. They can understand what to do with it and will take actions. Again, this will show the HR department that this is what I've done. I've assigned so many tasks to the managers and leaders, and they are acting on it. You can show this data to your employees, and they again gain trust that, okay, I told this in the engagement survey, and I can clearly see my leadership teams acting on it, right? That is how we can build trust with our employees. And so, yes, designing driver based surveys instead of generic ones, run automated pulse surveys, annual engagement surveys with a lot of data is going to make every HR manager's job a lot more harder to figure out, and to even present to the line managers on what is happening is quite a task. And use AI sentiment analysis, right? How do I know what to prioritize first? If 20% of my employees are talking about a particular issue, maybe that's something that I can pick it up in the next quarter. But if 80% of my employees are talking about a particular issue, then that is something that I need to prioritize right now. In fact, in our experiences, we have seen, survey results where a certain employee section was just feeling that the AC in that section of the area was very, very bad, and all of them were leaving early because it was quite hot to sit there. That is lost resources. That is lost capacity for you. If everybody from a particular department, just because the AC is not functioning well, is going to leave organization 2 hours earlier, then you can imagine the impact of it on your business and what that means on your operational costs, right? And that fix for an organization which has 1,000 employees or plus is very, very minute. But without the engagement survey and without asking the right question, that is something that none of us can fix it. People can go on complaining to the teams that, hey, the AC is not working, but you will never be able to find that is why people are leaving. And again, that is where the sentiment analysis tells you what to prioritize first. Because 80% of the people, if they are going to be talking about something, I need to act on it right now. And if that particular population is going to be my leadership team, I want to know what they're feeling. And I want to ensure I hear them and then I fix it so that my entire organization works accurately or works towards the common goal of the business. If my leadership team is going to be very disengaged, the entire organization will be disengaged. And again, that is lost capacity up to 50% of the levels. And that is where our heat maps and segmentations come into place. You should, as organizations, segment the data into your leadership teams, into your level of employees, into their locations, into every demography that they have, so that we are able to understand what problems. And I can tell you that every segmentation will have very different problems. And those are things that we can fix and get higher output from them. I'm sure all of us here would have heard that we all need to run efficient teams, right? HR departments keep hearing, do we really need to hire more people? Why is the attrition rate so high, right? Only when we segment and see the data, we know what to act on so that there is less attrition. And your managers can understand how they can run efficient teams only when they can segment the data and see it for themselves and are given guidance on what they are to take actions on. I can sit on a meeting and my HR department can tell me that, hey, your team's engagement scores are so low, and I will have no idea what I can do about it because I don't know where to start. And I have 100 other things that I have to deliver that very same day. So I would want to have a starting point. And in the era of AI, why not? Why not take the help and have it? And when it comes to AI, there are a lot of tools that do give you AI, but is that reliable? Are your employees' data safe? Because again, we're all dealing with employee data, right? When it comes to engagement surveys, So the security of the AI is also highly, highly a requirement that we see across the industries and across countries. And almost that's a wrap for the day. And any questions, Laura, Lynn, and me are here to answer. And any thoughts you can share or anything that comes in your mind, you all can share with us. Laura, Lynn, anything from your side that you would like to share?
No, at this point, I think we're good. I would like you to tell the participants about the toolkit when you get a chance. And
Yes.
that's it.
I would also like to tell our lovely audience today that we have a toolkit on how to get started with the engagement surveys, along with our Thrive Spyro's $250 credit on the platform as well. So the toolkit acts as the guide on what Lynn and Laura had mentioned about how to get started. Because without a guide on where I have to start, we all are going to take a little bit while to figure out and get this going, right? So the toolkit in particular sets a framework for us to get started the right way. So this is the scanner for the toolkit. You'll be able to scan and get the toolkit from there, or we will also send you an email post our conversation today. And that is the QR code for Thrive Spyro. If you want to get your $250 credit, please do scan it, or we can send you an email, or you can also get in touch with us on LinkedIn or on our any channel or the website. Any questions or anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, the only thing I want really to convey is how important the action planning at the manager level is. Um, we know through research that 70% of the variance between teams or team engagement is directly attributed to the manager. And so as we're disaggregating data, it is important that we disaggregate down to a team level while also maintaining enough anonymity. So deciding what that number value is in terms of responses before you aggregate up. Um, Even if your team's data isn't fully aggregated and you're using your next level up, you still want to use that data. You still want to have those conversations and understand what drives your specific team's engagement. Because what drives your team's engagement is going to be different than what drives another team's engagement. And that's where you really start to see change happen, which then rolls up into change across the organization in terms of engagement levels.
That is true, Laura. I totally agree with you on that as well. Uh, so yeah, thank you so much for joining today, and I hope we could tell you on how to get started with your engagement surveys and how to run them efficiently. We do will send out the toolkit and the credits as well. And any other questions you have later on, you can email it to us or drop us on our website or connect with us on LinkedIn. So, wishing everybody a wonderful evening ahead, and thank you so much for the day.
Thank you.